In this tutorial, we're going to discuss a 6-step procedure for completing the square. You'll want to repeat this process using the tutorials as a guide as many times as it takes until you're able to reproduce them on your own. The rule is you want to repeat as many times as you have steps. So we have 6 steps in completing the square. You'll want to repeat this 6 times and then test yourself. Now each step will have a short mantra that you'll want to repeat out loud to yourself as you work each step. But before we get into that, let's discuss what it means to be a complete square. So suppose you have two numbers you're going to add together. Let's just call them x and y. They're just placeholders. All right, and we're going to square the result. Now the way you want to read this is the first term squared plus 2 times the first term times the second term plus the second term squared. That's your mantra that you'll want to repeat. Now if you have a difference, that's fine too. You take the first term squared plus 2 times the first term times the second term. Right? The second term is negative, so it gives you negative 2xy plus the last term squared. So that's your mantra you want to repeat out loud every time you take the sum of two numbers and square the result. It's the first term squared plus 2 times the first term times the second term plus the second term squared. This is going to save you a lot of time. Now we're going to work backwards from this. That's what it means to complete the square. Let's get started. Consider the quadratic function ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Now x is your variable, a, b, and c are just constants, and this is the standard form for a quadratic equation. Now the first step, step 1, will be to divide the left and right side by a. Remember, what we do on one side of the equation we have to do on the other in order to maintain the integrity of the equation. So let's just go ahead and divide or multiply by 1 over a. And we're doing this to both sides. We have to do it to both sides. Now you'll want to distribute the 1 over a to each term. Okay, so this will give you a over a x squared plus b over a x plus c over a, and then 1 over a times 0 is just simply 0. Right? And this will give us x squared plus b over a x plus c over a is equal to 0. And your mantra for this step will be divide the left and right sides by a. This is the first step, nice and neat. Step 1, divide the left and right side by a. Now step 2 will be to move the term c over a to the right hand side. So your mantra will be move c over a from the left to the right side, making it negative. All right, so you physically want to think about moving it from the left hand side to the right hand side. And when you do that, it becomes negative. That's the way we want to think about it with movement. Plus on the left hand side is minus on the right hand side. Plus on the right hand side is minus on the left hand side. And our mantra for this will be move c over a from the left hand side to the right hand side. That is step number 2. Here we have step 2, written nice and neat. Now step 3. Step 3 will be to cut the coefficient of x in half, square it, add it to both sides. That's a mouthful. We'll have to repeat that several times. Now the coefficient of x is b over a. So here's what we're going to do. We rewrite x squared plus b over a times x. Then we take and we're going to add a term to each side, and it's going to be a square term. We take the coefficient of x, b over a, and we cut it in half, which means b over 2a. And we square it and add it to both sides. The more times you do this, the more times you'll write it down, it'll begin to flow. That is step 3. So the mantra for step 3 is take the coefficient of x and cut it in half. Square the result and add it to both sides. That's what we did. We took the coefficient of x, cut it in half, squared the result, and add it to both sides. Written nice and neat. Here's what we have. Now we're going quite slow here, but we will speed up every time we repeat this procedure. Okay, now we have step 4. Step 4 will be to write the left side as a perfect square. Now let's go back to what we talked about in the very beginning of the tutorial, and that is when you have the sum of two numbers and you square the results. Now we're using a lot of x, y's, a's, b's, and c's here. Don't worry about that. Remember, x and y, a, b, and c are just meant to hold a position. Okay, they're just placeholders. So x and y here represent two numbers that I'm adding together and squaring the result. And what we say to ourselves is, our mantra is x squared, first term squared, plus 2 times the first term times the second term plus the second term squared. Now notice the square roots of these terms, okay, right there. X squared, x, y squared, and y. And when I take x and y and multiply them together times 2, I get the middle term. Keep that in mind, because what I want to do here is write x squared plus b over ax plus b over 2a squared. I want to write that as a perfect square. So we write our parentheses, square, right? The first term will be x plus what's inside the square of the second term, b over 2a, okay? You want to memorize that. Now we just go ahead and fill in the blank on the right-hand side. We leave the right-hand side alone. Okay. Don't think about what these terms are. Remember, they're just placeholders. They're just placeholders. Okay. But notice, if I work out this first term as I did below here, okay, it is the first term squared plus 2 times the first term times the second term plus the second term squared, b over 2a squared. Okay. Now notice, I divide out the 2's. Let's simplify it up a little bit. X squared plus, what do we have here? B over a. Remember, I can switch the order. I can do that with multiplication. B over ax plus b over 2a quantity squared. Okay, that is what I have when I started with. Okay, so here we completed the square. Right? But in this procedure, we want to use the complete square to solve for x. So we're not done. We have 2 more steps left. But you want to take it nice and slow. Okay, it all starts with the sum of 2 numbers squared gives you the first term squared plus 2 times the first term times the second term plus the second term squared. Okay, we run that backwards to get step 4, which is write the left side as a perfect square. On to step 5. So here we have step 4 written out nice and neat. Write the left side as a perfect square. Okay? And if you want to work it out, take the first term, square it, add it to 2 times the first term times the second term, plus the second term squared, and you'll go back to step 3. Okay? Step 5 is take the square root of both sides. Take the square root of both sides. So if I have x plus b over 2a, quantity squared, equals b over 2a squared minus c over a. Okay. If I take the square root of one side, I have to take the square root of the other. What you do on one side, you have to do on the other. Okay. So, take the square root of both sides. And what are we left with? We have x plus b over 2a. And we will say that's plus or minus. Because remember, if you take the square root, that is plus or minus. It only goes on one side. Plus or minus on both sides wouldn't make any sense. So your plus or minus goes on the left-hand side with your square root. So you just keep the plus or minus with the square root. And on the left-hand side, now notice on the left-hand side, I took the square root of a square. Okay. Remember, if I have x squared and I take the square root, that will give me back x. So the square root of a square, you just go back to where you started from underneath the square. Okay, that works itself out. Written nice and neat for step 5, here's what we have. So our mantra for step 5 is take the square root of both sides. You keep repeating that to yourself, take the square root of both sides. It will match up with the equation we have here for step 5, right? So your brain will learn what that equation means, what that process really means translated into words rather than equations, right? Okay, step 6, the final step. We're going to solve for x by moving b over 2a from the left side to the right side, making the term negative. Remember, when you cross the equal sign, okay, when you cross the equal sign for addition and subtraction, you just change the sign. That's all you do. Okay, so this is our original equation 5. Take your time. Now I'm going to move from the right, or from the left to the right, and I have x is equal to negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b over 2a squared minus c over a. And there you have it. Step 6, nice and neat. Solve for x by moving b over 2a from the left side to the right side, making the term negative. Now, one thing to note here is that if you simplify this up a little bit, you get our famous quadratic equation. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. All we have to simply do is manipulate equation 6 a little bit, and we have this very famous equation. Okay. Now the point of completing the square is to learn the mechanics of the quadratic function. Repeat this process 6 times and you'll have it. Okay. And in the next video, we're going to go through it nice and smooth, rather quickly, repeating each mantra as we go.